It was a dark night. It was a dark night. For us who live in the city, it's hard for us to remember that unless you've been out in the country, somewhere like Montana or one of the Dakotas, and away from all the cities, it gets dark at night when we don't have electricity. And if there's no moon, like I like to picture it on this night, if it's one of those really dark nights, it's a dark and lonely night, sitting on the hill, watching sheep. The shepherds would have been a collection of cast-offs. Shepherds were not anybody in this society. They were the day workers of their time. They were the people that no one wanted their son to grow up to be or daughter. No one wanted to marry a shepherd. They stank. They were unreliable. They could not testify in court because everyone knew they were liars. They were the lowest of the low in this society. So just like the night was dark and hard to see, in their own world seemed cold and inhospitable. They were the ignored ones, the outcasts. Maybe people spit at them, or at least mumbled under their breath as they walked by. Shepherds. It was a dark night, much like their lives, without much hope. And we can, probably it's dangerous to psychoanalyze what these shepherds were like, but we can assume that it was a tough life that they lived. Maybe they enjoyed being outside, but not being part of society, being told that they're really not welcome anywhere. Likely they were not welcome at church as well because everyone knew they were sinners, and especially the pastors, the Pharisees, the rabbis of the time had a way of telling people who was really in and who was not. And everyone knew that if you might be struggling and try to get through all and try to be righteous, but we knew that shepherds were part of that people out there, and they were really not welcome among God's holy people. And why we need to be careful of equating dark with evil. It was just a dark time for their lives and not a lot of hope. It was a dark night. And that's the context to which this night illumines, like a starburst. Into this darkness and this brokenness, into this not fitting in or not being told that they are not welcome anywhere, into this broken-hearted people comes the greatest news of all time to them. They were the first ones. It was a dark night. And as a couple from up north trudged towards their ancestral home, or at least his ancestral home, they too were on the outskirts of society, engaged but not married, 9 months pregnant. Doesn't allow you much welcome into civilized society. There would have been those who had whispered, and probably already had whispered, had made up all sorts of stories about what was going on. It was a dark night as they walked and they plodded to an uncertain future. Joseph had to wonder what kind of hope he could bring this young bride, what kind of hope he could bring this child that she carried as they walked and they walked into the darkness and the uncertainty. And even when they got there, they found that things were swelled because everyone else was at the town. And so now the darkness became even greater because even in their ancestral home, the guest room where they would normally go, sometimes translated inn, inappropriately, but the place where the guests would go was already filled, maybe by some aunts and uncles or cousins that got there first, and there wasn't any place for them. So even among their own family, they seemed like they were outcasts, pushed aside, and what was left for them was the room where they kept the animals at the night. Stinky and noisy and off the part of the house where nobody else went except in the morning to let the animals out. It was a dark night, and there was no welcome for this couple who wondered about what light they might see ever in their lives. It was a dark night. For the people in general were under oppression all over their lives. There was a political pressure. There was an occupation by a brutal force from somewhere across the sea that treated them like dirt. That was filled with the racism and the classism that pushed them aside and kept them down. There was the pressure from the religious authorities that, as I've said, already had people pegged who were sinners and who were not. And so their whole world was one of frustration and wanting God to break into this darkness and try to bring them some hope. It was a dark night, and this night was no different than anything else that they had ever experienced. And they had no reason to hope that there was something different coming. It was a dark night. For the couple, they find hope in family, where they're not welcome and where they're maybe outcasts other places in this home where maybe Joseph grew up, or maybe he knew of this place. There was a place of light and welcome. And even though they were part of where the animals were, at least there were people around them, and they were there, not alone again. And of course, to the shepherds, to these outcasts of outcasts, their darkness explodes with light, because it's to them, the least of these in their community, to which God deems they are the ones that should hear the first news. They are the ones. It is the celebration of this entire ministry that this little baby will have. It's to these people that he comes, not to the ones who consider themselves already part of God's brightness in the way they live, but to those who've been pushed aside and told they're no longer any good. So this dark night, this dark life, this dark existence for these people is now brought to a new illumination of hope and of love. For unto you, the angel tells these shepherds, unto you is born this day. Not Herod, not Caesar, not the pious religious folks, but to you in this dark hillside, to you, Mary and Joseph, in this house. To you, the people who are suffering, this is where the light comes. I was struck as we got ready for worship and we heard those familiar words so beautifully sung by Kevin. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appears and the soul felt his worth. A thrill of hope. A weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. That's the essence of why we gather tonight. All of us bring some sort of brokenness into this room. All of us bring some sort of darkness or depression or anxiety or guilt or even shame. All of us have been told something by someone that makes us feel not welcome. All of us have that part of us because we're human beings. And we've lived long enough to know that the world sometimes hurts. And in this night, unto us is born this day the light of the world that came to people just like you and me, just like the shepherds, just like a carpenter and his fiancée, just like people all over the world who struggle and who wander and yearn for peace. We live in a weary world, and sometimes we are weary people. But unto us is born this day unto you the one who claims you, embraces you, loves you, and lifts you up. Not someday, not when you get better, not when you shape up, not when you start acting normally, whatever that means, but unto us this day. Whatever we bring into this space, Christ embraces that with healing, with hope, and above all, with love. Thanks be to God.